He broke bones on screen, but off screen, he broke traditions. Bruce Lee didn't just fight opponents, he fought the limits of martial arts itself. Let's dive into the top 10 facts about Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, starting with the moment it all began. Dieter 10. Jeet Kune Do was born out of frustration. Bruce Lee wasn't trying to create a new style, he was trying to escape one. In the early 1960s, Lee was already a skilled practitioner of Wing Chun, the Chinese martial art taught to him by the legendary Ip Man. But when he moved to America, something began to bother him deeply. He realized that traditional martial arts, as beautiful and disciplined as they were, had become trapped. Trapped in patterns, forms, and rituals that didn't always work in a real fight. Bruce was all about truth in combat. He once said, "Traditional martial arts are like a classical musician. You play a piece perfectly but never create your own music." That idea burned inside him until it exploded. He began experimenting, mixing boxing, fencing, and street fighting tactics into his training. It wasn't about memorizing moves anymore. It was about freedom. In 1967, he gave his new philosophy a name, Jeet Kune Do, which means the way of the intercepting fist. He didn't mean style, as in karate, kung fu, or judo. In fact, he hated the idea of style. Jeet Kune Do was meant to be anti-style, a system built to destroy systems. Imagine a young fighter walking into a dojo today and telling the instructor, "I don't follow forms, I follow results." That's how radical Bruce Lee was in the 1960s. To him, fighting wasn't art for art's sake. It was about efficiency, doing what worked and discarding the rest. His goal was brutally simple: absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and add what is uniquely your own. Those words became the foundation not just of Jeet Kune Do, but of modern mixed martial arts as we know it. In fact, many MMA legends, from Dana White to Joe Rogan, have openly said that Jeet Kune Do was the philosophical ancestor of MMA. Without Bruce Lee breaking away from rigidity, the UFC might not even exist. So yes, Jeet Kune Do was born out of frustration, but that frustration changed the entire world of combat. Number 9. Jeet Kune Do was influenced by Western boxing and fencing. Bruce Lee didn't just study Asian martial arts. He devoured knowledge from everywhere. While living in Seattle and later Los Angeles, he spent hours analyzing films of boxing matches and studying fencing manuals. At first, people thought he was crazy. Why would a kung fu master care about European fencing? Because fencing, like boxing, wasn't about tradition. It was about timing, distance, and precision. 3 elements Bruce considered essential for survival in a real fight. He once said that the philosophy of fencing was like the science of interception. And that's exactly what Jeet Kune Do was built on. In fencing, you don't wait for your opponent to attack. You anticipate, you intercept, you strike first. The same principle became the heart of Jeet Kune Do, the intercepting fist. It wasn't about blocking punches, it was about ending the fight before it started. Lee studied footwork from fencers, head movement from boxers, and body mechanics from street fighters. He realized that while traditional martial artists stood rooted in formal stances, boxers flowed like water, constantly moving, adapting, and changing angles. That fluidity became his obsession. Watch any of his fight scenes, from Enter the Dragon to his sparring footage, and you will see the boxing influence instantly. The quick jabs, the sidesteps, the shifting weight. Bruce Lee's fighting stance looked more like a boxer's crouch than any kung fu pose. His left hand guarded high like a fencer's foil, and his right hovered near his torso, ready to strike like lightning. He also admired Muhammad Ali, studying his movements frame by frame using an old movie projector. Lee once told a student, "Ali's footwork is poetry in motion. He's not bound by form, he's pure rhythm." And that's exactly what Jeet Kune Do was meant to capture. rhythm without restriction, freedom without form. But the genius wasn't just in combining techniques, it was in understanding why they worked. Bruce didn't believe in sacred techniques. He believed in what worked for you, right now. If something from Western boxing worked better than something from ancient Kung Fu, he'd take it, no hesitation. This blend of East and West created something entirely new. Not a mix, not a hybrid, but a living, breathing philosophy of combat. In many ways, Jeet Kune Do wasn't a martial art at all. It was a way of thinking, a way of fighting that refused to be chained by culture, by ego, or by rules. That's why, when Bruce Lee threw a punch, he wasn't just striking his opponent. He was striking centuries of tradition. Darker 8. Be water, my friend. Wasn't just a quote. It was the essence of Jeet Kune Do. If there's one phrase that defines Bruce Lee's philosophy, it's "Be water, my friend." Those 4 words have been printed on posters, t-shirts, and tattoos across the world, but few people really understand what they mean in the context of Jeet Kune Do. To Bruce, water wasn't just a poetic metaphor. It was the ultimate symbol of adaptability. He explained it simply. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. In other words, true mastery isn't about rigidity. It's about flowing with the situation. In combat, that meant never committing to one form or pattern. If your opponent was fast, you became faster. If they were powerful, you became elusive. Water has no ego. It moves around obstacles rather than crashing through them. Bruce believed that's how a fighter should move, fluid, unpredictable, and unstoppable. When Lee taught his students, he told them that the biggest enemy in martial arts wasn't another fighter. It was the mind that clings to form. Once you believe there's only one right way to fight, you've already lost. That's why Jeet Kune Do isn't about memorizing drills. It's about unlearning them. He compared martial arts schools to prisons where fighters are locked in by style names and traditions. Jeet Kune Do was his jailbreak. It demanded that each fighter find their own truth through experience, not imitation. This mindset reached far beyond combat. In America during the 1970s, when individuality and self-expression were cultural movements, Bruce's "Be Water" message resonated deeply. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about life. Adapt to the world. Don't fight it. Flow around resistance instead of breaking against it. Even today, business leaders, athletes, and philosophers quote Bruce's water metaphor as a guide for personal growth. But for him, it always started in the dojo, with the realization that no stance, no style, and no technique could ever be as powerful as the human ability to adapt. When Bruce fought, he didn't predict his opponent's move. He felt it. He became it. Like water. That's Jeet Kune Do in its purest form, an art where form itself disappears. 7. Jeet Kune Do isn't a set of moves. It as a way of thinking. This is where most people get Jeet Kune Do wrong. They see the kicks, the punches, the slick moves, and think, oh, that's the Bruce Lee style. But Bruce Lee would have hated that idea. He insisted again and again, Jeet Kune Do is not a style. Do not treat it like one. To him, Jeet Kune Do was a process of discovery. Every person's version of it was supposed to be unique, because every person is unique. He told his students, if you copy me, you're missing the point. It wasn't about doing what Bruce did. It was about thinking how Bruce thought. In many ways, Jeet Kune Do was a rebellion against tradition, but also against imitation. Bruce noticed that in many martial arts, students spent years perfecting techniques they might never use in a real fight. They were practicing for performance, not survival. Jeet Kune Do stripped that away. He said, it's not daily increase, but daily decrease. Hack away the unessential. That's one of his most powerful quotes. The idea was to constantly simplify, to remove everything that didn't serve your purpose. whether that was a fancy move, a wasted motion, or even a belief that limited your flexibility. If a boxer's jab worked better than a kung fu strike in a given moment, Bruce used the jab. If a street brawler's shove created an opening, he'd take that too. Jeet Kune Do didn't care about where something came from. It only cared about whether it worked. Think about how revolutionary that was in the 1960s. At that time, martial arts were often tied to cultural identity and hierarchy. There were rules about who could learn what. Some masters refused to teach non-Asians. Bruce blew that door wide open. He taught anyone, black, white, Asian, man, or woman, who was willing to learn. This openness got him into serious trouble with the Chinese martial arts community in San Francisco. Traditionalists accused him of betraying their culture by teaching Westerners. One rival martial artist even challenged him to a duel over it. Bruce accepted and won decisively. But afterward, instead of celebrating, he was disappointed. He realized the fight had taken too long. He'd won, but not efficiently enough. That S, when he began dissecting everything he knew and refining it into what would become the Jeet Kune Do mindset. Don T. Fight for style. Fight for truth. Jeet Kune Do's ultimate message is intellectual as much as it is physical. It's about thinking for yourself, questioning every rule, testing every method, and trusting your own instincts above dogma. In that sense, Bruce Lee wasn't just a martial artist, he was a philosopher disguised as a fighter. His notebooks, later published in The Tao of Jeet Kune Do, read more like a mix of Sun Tzu and Aristotle than a training manual. They're filled with lines like, "The highest technique is to have no technique." He wanted fighters to reach a state where instinct replaced thought, where decisions happened faster than conscious reasoning. To him, that was the true freedom every martial artist should seek, the freedom of no mind, or mushin, as it's called in Zen philosophy. That S.Y. Jeet Kune Do wasn't he built to be passed down like a static tradition. It was meant to evolve with each person who practiced it. And in a way, that's Bruce Lee's greatest legacy. Not that he taught us how to fight, but that he taught us how to think. Yucker 6. Bruce Lee used science to revolutionize martial arts. Most martial artists in the 1960s trained through repetition, do the same move thousands of times until it became instinct. Bruce Lee took a completely different path. He approached martial arts like a scientist, constantly experimenting, documenting, and refining everything he did. His notebooks were filled with sketches, formulas, and physics calculations about movement and force. He treated his body like a laboratory, and his techniques like evolving experiments. Bruce spent countless hours studying biomechanics, kinesiology, and even human anatomy. He was fascinated by how muscle groups work together, how leverage affected striking power, and how reaction time could be trained. While other fighters were throwing punches blindly, Bruce was analyzing why some hits landed harder, faster, or more accurately than others. For instance, he measured the impact of his famous 1-inch punch using Newton's third law. Force equals mass times acceleration. That punch wasn't magic, it was physics. Bruce trained his fast-twitch muscle fibers to explode at the point of contact, transferring maximum energy over the shortest possible distance. It is why people who watched him perform it in demonstrations looked like they'd been hit by a truck, even though his hand barely moved. He also took inspiration from Western athletes, sprinters, boxers, and weightlifters, because he wanted to understand how the best in each discipline used their bodies. While most martial artists dismissed weight training, fearing it would make them muscle-bound, Bruce used it strategically to increase strength without losing speed. He developed his own fitness programs long before functional training became a trend. And Bruce wasn't content with just physical training. He applied psychology, too. He studied reaction times, visual cues, and even the limits of human attention. He taught his students to observe patterns and break them. One of his favorite drills was to purposely fake weakness, drop the guard slightly, lure the opponent in, and then strike during their moment of confidence. It was psychological warfare wrapped in philosophy. His obsession with science made him the most modern martial artist of his time. When you watch UFC fighters today, you're seeing echoes of Bruce's methods, training based on data, not tradition. He didn't separate mind and body. To him, they were one unit that had to be optimized through constant feedback. In a sense, Bruce Lee wasn't just a martial artist, he was the first sports scientist of combat. He combined the discipline of a monk with the curiosity of a physicist. That's why Jeet Kune Do wasn't built on myth or mysticism. It was built on measurable truth. Number 5. Jeet Kune Do was so revolutionary, it threatened the martial arts industry. When Bruce Lee began promoting Jeet Kune Do, he wasn't just challenging fighters, he was challenging an entire system. At the time, martial arts schools were booming in both Asia and the United States, each claiming superiority over the others. There were schools of karate, judo, kung fu, and taekwondo, all with strict hierarchies, uniforms, and traditions. Then Bruce came along and basically said, "All of you are wrong." He criticized martial arts organizations for focusing more on loyalty and ritual than on truth. He mocked the obsession with belts, rankings, and titles, calling them ornaments of ego. He said, "A belt only covers your waist. You need something that covers your whole being." That was considered heresy. Masters who had spent decades building their reputation suddenly saw Bruce as a dangerous rebel threatening their authority. When he demonstrated Jeet Kune Do, many instructors dismissed it as westernized kung fu. But the truth was, Bruce had created something beyond categorization. He stripped away the ceremony, the chanting, the rigid forms, and focused on results. He didn't bow to traditions, he bowed to reality. This made him a target. Some martial arts schools in California refused to work with him. Others tried to publicly discredit him, saying Jeet Kune Do lacked discipline. Bruce found that ironic. To him, Jeet Kune Do required even more discipline because it forced fighters to think for themselves. Despite the backlash, Jeet Kune Do started spreading fast. Bruce's charisma, combined with his undeniable skill, drew people in. Hollywood stars, athletes, and even military instructors came to learn from him. Steve McQueen, James Coburn, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar were among his students. But what really set Jeet Kune Do apart was how it broke down racial and cultural walls. At a time when Asian martial arts were often exoticized or misunderstood, Bruce presented them with pride, but also with evolution. He showed the world that martial arts weren't frozen in the past. They could evolve, merge, and adapt just like technology or music. In one of his interviews, he said, "If people say Jeet Kune Do is different from this or that, let it be known. It's not different. It's simply the truth, outside of all patterns." By refusing to be boxed in, Bruce made enemies among traditionalists, but he made history among thinkers. Jeet Kune Do wasn't just a martial art. It was a declaration of independence from everything fake, pretentious, and limiting in the martial world. He didn't just want to revolutionize how people fought, he wanted to revolutionize how they lived. That's why today, decades after his death, Jeet Kune Do still feels fresh. It's not about mastering techniques, it's about mastering yourself. When Bruce Lee said, "All fixed patterns are incapable of adaptability," he wasn't just talking about martial arts. He was talking about life, and maybe that's what made him dangerous. Not because he could beat you in a fight, but because he could beat your ideas. Rapport. Jeet Kune Do changed how movies portrayed martial arts. Before Bruce Lee hit the big screen, martial arts in movies were mostly theatrical. Think choreographed routines where opponents waited politely to be hit, long pauses between moves, and flashy but unrealistic spins. Bruce hated that. He once said, "Fighting in movies should feel like fighting, not dancing." And with Jeet Kune Do, he changed everything about how combat was shown to the world. When Bruce got his break in Hollywood, starting with The Green Hornet, He shocked directors by refusing to do staged, slow-motion sequences. He wanted raw speed, real contact, and visible impact. He didn't want his fights to look beautiful. He wanted them to look real. That philosophy came directly from Jeet Kune Do, where efficiency mattered more than elegance. In Enter the Dragon, you can see this philosophy in motion. Every punch is explosive, every kick has purpose, and every movement flows naturally into the next. Bruce made martial arts cinematic, not through theatrics, but through truth. His punches were fast enough that cameramen had to ask him to slow down because film reels couldn't capture them properly. He also brought a new level of psychology to fight scenes. His characters weren't emotionless warriors. They were thinkers, strategists adapting on the fly just like his real-life Jeet Kune Do students. You can see him reading his opponent's rhythm, breaking it, then striking decisively. That's Jeet Kune Do, hidden inside entertainment. What most people didn't realize was that these movies doubled as lessons. Bruce was teaching philosophy through film. Every fight was a metaphor for his beliefs. Simplicity over showmanship, adaptability over arrogance, truth over tradition. When he defeats an enemy with a single strike after minutes of evasion, he's demonstrating that real mastery lies in restraint, not excess. Hollywood quickly took notice. Action choreography changed forever after Bruce Lee. The exaggerated, stylized fighting of the past gave way to realistic, grounded motion. Directors and stunt coordinators started studying Jeet Kune Do principles: flow, economy of motion, rhythm, to create more believable combat. Decades later, actors like Jackie Chan, Jet Li, and Donnie Yen continued evolving that cinematic realism. But Bruce laid the foundation. Even the Matrix films, with their iconic bullet-time fight scenes, drew inspiration from Bruce's emphasis on speed and mental flow. The Wachowskis once said that without Bruce Lee, modern action cinema wouldn't move the same way. That's not an exaggeration. Jeet Kune Do didn't just change how people fought, it changed how people saw fighting. Bruce Lee brought authenticity to a world of illusion, and in doing so, he immortalized his philosophy far beyond the dojo. Number 3. Jeet Kune Do inspired the birth of mixed martial arts. Long before UFC was even an idea, Bruce Lee had already predicted it. In the 1960s, martial arts communities were separated by style: karate versus kung fu, judo versus boxing. No one dared mix disciplines seriously. Then Bruce Lee appeared, dismantling that mindset completely. He once said, "Why should I limit myself to one style when truth exists in all styles?" He began combining the best elements from every art he encountered. From Wing Chun, he kept the close-range trapping and reflex drills. From boxing, he adopted footwork, angles, and the jab. From fencing, he took timing and interception. From judo and wrestling, he integrated takedowns and balance control. In essence, he was doing what modern MMA fighters do today, but decades earlier. When the first UFC event happened in 1993, martial artists from different backgrounds competed to see which style worked best. But over time, everyone realized the same truth Bruce had discovered. There is no best style, only the best combination. Fighters like Anderson Silva, Georges St. Pierre, and John Jones later credited Bruce Lee as the spiritual father of MMA. Dana White, the president of UFC, even called Bruce the father of mixed martial arts. The parallels are uncanny. Jeet Kune Do emphasized cross-training, adaptability, and efficiency, core values of modern MMA. The idea that a fighter should train in multiple disciplines, learn to strike, grapple, defend, and counter from every position came directly from Bruce's vision. He didn't just break barriers between techniques, he broke barriers between cultures. In his classes, you could find students from every background training side by side. That kind of inclusivity was rare at the time. He saw martial arts not as cultural property but as a universal language. And what's fascinating is that Bruce Lee reached these conclusions without having MMA gyms, modern gear, or global tournaments to learn from. He relied purely on observation, experimentation, and logic. He sparred with boxers, fencers, judokas, anyone who could challenge his assumptions. Every time he lost, he learned. Every time he won, he refined. His approach perfectly aligned with the scientific method. Test, adapt, repeat. If something worked in a real fight, it stayed. If it didn't, it was gone the next day. That's how Jeet Kune Do evolved, not through tradition, but through truth in performance. And that's why Jeet Kune Do still feels modern, even 60 years later, because it's not frozen in time. It's alive. It evolves with every generation of fighters who embrace its philosophy, whether they know it or not. So, when you watch a UFC match today and see a fighter transition from a jab to a leg kick to a takedown in one fluid motion, you're re-seeing Bruce Lee-esque Ghost in the octagon. His spirit lives in every fighter who believes in adaptability over rigidity, freedom over form. In short, MMA didn't invent the concept of mixed martial arts. Bruce Lee did. The rest of the world just caught up. Leerfurk 2. Jeet Kune Do became a philosophy for life, not just for fighting. When Bruce Lee said, "Absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and add what is uniquely your own," he wasn't just talking about punches and kicks, he was talking about life itself. Jeet Kune Do evolved into something far greater than a combat system. It became a way of thinking, a philosophy of freedom, and authenticity that people could apply to anything: business, creativity, relationships, or personal growth. Bruce understood that humans tend to build walls around themselves: mental, emotional, cultural. He believed that true mastery came from breaking those walls down. To express yourself honestly, he said, is the very essence of martial arts. That meant stripping away ego, imitation, and fear until all that's left is the pure, unfiltered version of you. He trained his students to fight, but also to see, to recognize patterns not just in opponents, but in themselves: habits, assumptions, limitations. To Bruce, the real battle wasn't fought in the ring, it was fought within the mind. Jeet Kune Do became his way of teaching awareness. Every movement had purpose, every pause had meaning. That's why his lessons resonated so deeply beyond the martial arts world. Entrepreneurs saw parallels with innovation: test what works, drop what doesn't, adapt constantly. Artists found inspiration in his be-water mindset, realizing creativity was about flow and not forcing things. Even psychologists and educators later referenced Bruce Lee's approach to self-actualization as an example of human potential unleashed. He turned combat into a metaphor for living fully. "Empty your mind," he said. "Be formless, shapeless, like water." That wasn't just about fighting. It was about navigating life's chaos with grace. When obstacles appear, flow around them. When challenges arise, shift form. And when opportunities come, strike with precision and conviction. What made Jeet Kune Do revolutionary wasn't the fighting style. It was the thinking style. It gave people permission to question everything: tradition, authority, even their own beliefs. Bruce wanted his students, and the world, to understand that no external teacher could ever give you truth. You had to discover it yourself through experience, through doing. That's why he once told a reporter, "If you follow the classical pattern, you are understanding the routine, the tradition, the shadow. You are not understanding yourself." That one statement captures the soul of Jeet Kune Do. Your journey matters more than your technique. In modern times, countless individuals, from athletes to CEOs, still study Bruce Lee's writings for guidance. His Tao of Jeet Kune Do reads more like a philosophy manual than a martial arts guide. It challenges you to think differently, to act authentically, to live with awareness and adaptability. Jeet Kune Do may have started in the dojo, but it transcended it entirely. It became a blueprint for how to approach life: simple, efficient, and honest. And that's why, even decades after his death, Bruce Lee's teaching still hit harder than any punch he ever threw. Row 1. Jeet Kune Do died with Bruce Lee, but also became immortal. Here, as the paradox that defines Jeet Kune Do, it both died and survived with Bruce Lee. When he passed away in 1973, at just 32 years old, the world lost the only true master of his art. Unlike other systems, Jeet Kune Do had no official forms, no rigid structure, no certifications. Bruce didn't want disciples, he wanted thinkers, and that made it almost impossible to institutionalize his art after his death. Some of his original students, like Dan Inosanto, Taki Kimura, and James Lee, continued teaching, but each did so differently, interpreting Bruce's ideas through their own lens. That was exactly how Bruce wanted it. He didn't want a Jeet Kune Do association with ranks and belts. He feared it would become what he'd fought so hard against, another trapped system. In one of his last notes, he wrote, "Jeet Kune Do is merely a name. Don't fuss over it. Let it serve as a signpost, not a destination." That line explains everything. Bruce didn't want his creation to become dogma. He wanted it to remain alive, shifting, evolving, adapting with each new mind that embraced it. And that's exactly what happened. After his death, Jeet Kune Do split into two branches. One group aimed to preserve Bruce's original teachings, calling it Junfan Jeet Kune Do, named after his birth name, Lee Junfan. The other group focused on continuing his philosophy of evolution, adapting techniques to modern combat. The two sides debated fiercely for years, but in truth, both honored him in their own way. Because Bruce Lee Iwa's true legacy wasn't ETT in any specific technique, it was in the courage to question everything. He didn't just create fighters, he created thinkers. His spirit lives on in every person who refuses to be confined by labels, by systems, or by fear. Look around today. His influence is everywhere. In the octagon, in motivational books, in corporate training programs, in movies, and even in classrooms. His Be Water philosophy has been quoted by world leaders and taught in business schools. There's even a monument of Bruce in Hong Kong, his arm extended mid-strike, not in anger but in truth. Every punch he threw was a statement. Every lesson he taught was a revolution. And even though he's gone, the world continues to feel the ripple effect of his ideas. Jeet Kune Do was never meant to outlive him as a fixed system. It was meant to live through us as a mindset. That's why, to this day, Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do remains alive wherever someone dares to think differently, move freely, and express themselves honestly. He may have died young, but his art became immortal, because it was never about the man. It was about the movement. So the next time you hear someone say, "Be water, my friend," remember, it's not just a catchy line. It's a challenge, a reminder to stay fluid in life, to reject limits, and to seek truth in everything you do. Bruce Lee, NS Jeet Kune Do, wasn't designed to make better fighters. It was designed to make better humans. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Bruce Lee's revolutionary philosophy, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories about the legends who changed the world. Join the community to unlock exclusive content, behind-the-scenes discussions, and more. And if you want to support our work directly, hit the Thanks button below. Every contribution helps us keep exploring the extraordinary. Stay sharp, stay adaptable, and remember, the greatest fight is always within yourself.